called cheating.
Hi, Ben. Good morning for me, and good evening to you over in Germany. How you doing?
Uh, Good day to you, I'm going to say, which is the most neutral term. Doing well. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Doing pretty well. It's just came off of the Fourth of July celebration over here in the U.S., so had a good, nice day off. Spent a little bit of time in the sun and everything, and enjoying and happy to have a kind of a nice, relaxing way to wind down my week. Getting to hang out with you, and finally, I'm happy to have the overdue chance to get you onto the stream as well. We've interacted for quite a few years now through SQL bits and others, and you always have a very fun and larger than life, I think, personality and essence that you bring to like a conversation. So I think this will be a really good live stream today.
Thank you. Looking forward to it. Let's make it
And
fun.
the
But I guess that's
exactly,
what
and
we
I
do.
think
So.
you mentioned just on some of the personality things that I like about you. You have do you have enough glasses for every day of the year or most of the days of the year?
Well, not every day of the year. So we're between 50 and 60 now. I think 55 is the actual
Okay.
number. If we had had that live stream just after past last year, I could have given you the exact number because I was doing a skit on Power Hour where I was actually using my glasses as a data set.
Yeah,
Um,
that's fair.
I have to admit it, I did not keep that data set updated, and I would have to think how many glasses did I buy after that. But I'm going to say we're somewhere in the mid to high 50s now. So at
You have
least
at
one
least
for every
enough
week,
glasses
and
to
it
go
is
with.
fair.
I think you have at least enough to go with every suit that you own, I'm assuming.
Well, I have that, so I own way less suits than I own glasses, so there's that. But
That's
that's
fair.
also, I very rarely wear suits these days. So the most occasions we actually do wear suits is when I get the joy of having the community keynote at Bits with Mr. Rob, where every single year we come up with a new suit idea. So that kind of what condenses down. I wear jackets from time to time if we're going to like a really nice dinner or if I'm going to see like a quote unquote fancy client. Not really doing suits anymore. However, for the glasses part, I do
True.
come prepared. So I mean, I could in theory switch glasses mid-episode. Just saying. No brainer.
Okay. The all right. So you can do a wardrobe swap as we go through this.
Exactly.
Yeah. The I mean I think so similar to you. The I definitely have a few, but the only times I wear it is special occasions or conferences or when you want to dress up a little bit. But I the bright orange one that you had a couple of
Yeah.
years ago for sequel bits, that was a really fun one. Usually it's fairly easy to spot you from across the room because it's like, all right, who's the best well dressed individual that I can see at a distance is probably Ben.
Well, well dressed is debatable, but let's say most loudly dressed. That's usually what we do there. So
That's fair. Exactly. Um, but in the context of you coming on for the first time as well, I'd love to start with a chance for you to give a little introduction about yourself and kind of your involvement in the community, which I think will also be a good segue into eventually what we'll be talking about today. But what's a little background
sure
on
thing.
who you are, where you came from?
Sure thing. So my name is Biml Weissman. I'm based out of Nuremberg, Germany. I'm running a small consultancy firm here, and we focus on data warehousing, business intelligence, business analytics, whatever you want to call it. We used to do ETL, now we do data engineering. It's the exact same thing, but we give things fancy new names from time to time so nobody notices. Still doing a fair share of on-prem work, actually. So just because Central Europeans are slow with cloud adoption as always, but obviously also dipping the toes in the water for all the fancy new stuff like Fabric. And I got involved in the community 2016-ish.
Okay.
So let's say as an active part of the community because I started attending the PaaS Summit. I think my first PaaS Summit was 2010 or so. My first TechEd was 2005, I'm going to say. I would now have to go back to my basement to find all these old backpacks, and then I could tell you for sure, but somewhere there. But I was always, quote unquote, just an attendee there. And I didn't really think much of that. I went there, I learned a
Mhm.
ton in a couple of days or a week or whatever it was. Then was tired, went to my hotel room, slept, next morning learned a ton again, and then at the end of the week I flew home. And then I kind of started thinking doing something, but I didn't have anything to talk about because I mean that's the excuse I always get presented these days when I'm trying to convince people to do more in that community, and that's why I know firsthand how wrong everybody is when they say that. But
Yeah.
it was at a past summit where I actually met Katrina Wilhelmsen, but also the creators of Biml, which was the first topic I kind of started talking about, the business intelligence markup language, because we're like, hey, that's a pretty cool thing, because we've been developing all these SSIS packages for days and weeks and everything, and it's like super repetitive and actually super, and it's not super. You build like 100 packages and 99 of them are identical. There's this one package that you actually want to spend more time on because you want to optimize on that super large table or whatever, but you don't really get the time because you have to waste it on these other 99 super boring tables as well. So I was like, that is cool. So we started adopting that. It was one of the cool things I've learned there. I was like, okay, everybody needs to know about that. So I kind of started talking about that conferences. So April 1st, 2016 was my first ever public speaking gig at SQL Saturday Vienna. And from there, things started moving along. So from speaking came, hey, why don't I write a book with a couple of people? I blog from time to time. I stopped blogging because blogging isn't really, somehow not really my thing. I got more and more into the organizing side of the house rather than the speaking part of the house. I'm now involved in a couple of events as well. And so all these little puzzle pieces kind of came together, I guess, and are still coming together.
It's it sounds like a very very organic upward momentum that you kind of had, where each opportunity led way to a conversation for another opportunity, which
Exactly.
went from speaking to kind of helping run a bit of the back of the house to a degree of the events themselves, rather than just being one of the front facing presenters.
Also, I kind of have a talent of figuring out topics that people stop caring about soon after, kind of. Like one of the things I was super passionate about and still am kind of is big data clusters. We all know how that went, or where that went rather. So, yeah, when I start writing a book about something, people should be careful what that means for that product. That's what I'm saying, I guess.
So you use you as a bit of a canary in the coal mine if you get excited about a topic.
Yeah, and so I always, and that's almost kind of absurd. I always try to find something from me where I'm like, okay, I don't have to be like the only one doing that, but I kind of avoid jumping on topics that everybody can do, which is kind of dumb, because at the same time I keep telling people, hey, we need more introductory topics. And of course, there's 1,000 people out there that could do introduction to Power BI, that could do introduction in moving from Power BI to Fabric, or introduction from moving from Synapse to Fabric, or whatever. But there's so many opportunities out there. It doesn't matter if there's other people that can tell the same story. But and maybe at some point I should just start doing exactly that. Who knows?
Well, the advice that I got from one of my last bosses, but from like a decade ago on blogging, is it either needs to be a new topic, but if you can also blog on a topic that's already been blogged about, as long as you're putting your own story to it or something that's unique on how to spin it. Yes, you're doing these 5 steps, but is there any added value? If it's not just repeating and there's something unique about how you're describing this, where the method is slightly different, or you just have a different perspective on it, that's still, you're not just taking somebody else's work and copying it. You're still adding something new to the community for that. So like that's what I always try to think about. It's like, yes, 20 other people have blogged on true to this or videoed it, but there's some personality perspective that's being added there that people it's nice to like have 2 expert opinions that are slightly different from each other.
Agreed, 100%. So, because even if you're not plagiarizing somebody else's content, but if you're basically putting out the exact same topic with the exact same perspective, there's just, and then potentially the person wins that has the more reach, because, hey, I got this many followers and you only got that many followers. So that's why more people will get to see my content, but my content is, but that's the other thing where I'm trying to get people to rather amplify other people's stuff rather than trying to get into, oh, I'm going to do the exact same thing.
Exactly. And I personally, I have a hard time like not injecting a lot of personality into my stuff anyways, so it's pretty hard for me to ever like just completely carbon copy something. But I've still occasionally had times where it's like, are you just repeating? Like, no, I'm making sure to add like my 2 cents on a lot of these little things. And hence actually one of the reasons that I love these live streams is I'm pretty adamant on anybody that I get on for these to, like, you might be presenting a presentation that you've done 20 or 30 times, but we're going to have a lot of conversation throughout it. So the people watching this are still going to get a different perspective on what they might have seen before, because 20% of it is going to be a discussion, either from the chat or between the two of us on whatever you're presenting on. So there's still a lot of new content from there.
Agree. And even if this would be like a regular presentation, I always try to give it some new, just to keep it, if only keep it interesting for myself, to be honest. Because
I was going to say exactly. Like
there's these people that, and I kind of admire that they're kind of like machines. They give the same talk 50 times a year, and every single time it's exactly similar. I couldn't even do that because I'm not good at rehearsing and practicing my stuff in a way where I'm like, hey, this is exactly how it's going to go. If I'm starting a presentation today, I may not be 100% sure even which demos I'm going to do and which not, because which is obviously easier in person, which is why I'm kind of done with virtual conferences and presentations, for example. I always try to read the room. And if there's that, even if it's just one person where you can tell, okay, that person really cares about that specific thing, I would rather spend more time on that rather than something where nobody really seems to show that much interest.
Exactly. And to your point, it's you need to keep it entertaining for yourself. Otherwise, you sound like for some people, you end up just becoming a robot on stage. So I encourage people, for me, definitely to ask questions and a lot of other stuff, just because I would also like to enjoy my time if I'm going to be presenting a topic that's been presented 15 times already. But to the idea of the topic today on embracing the data community, where do we want to start with those conversations?
Maybe let's start at, I mean, we kind of already mentioned it's an agile process, so people should not expect to find one thing they do today and that's what they're going to do for the rest of their lives in the community, because things will change, at least for most of us. There's a ton of things you can do. You can start blogging if you like, well, I really don't want to be on a stage, or you're like, well, that speaking thing, that sounds really fun. So, I mean, one of the events that William Durkin and I are running is New Stars of Data, which kind of evolved out of the newcomer track at Data Grillin. And the sole purpose of that event, or of that track at our in-person event, is to give new speakers an opportunity to kind of test the waters there. So we provide them with a mentor. We will judge their abstract, obviously, in a much different way, because that's the other thing. If you've written like 50 abstracts in your life, they will, I'm going to say hopefully, well, if it's 50, you may already be at the point where like, well, they're going to pick me anyway, so I'm not going to put much effort in it. I see that more and more as well, to be honest, as an organizer. But if this is the first abstract you're writing, obviously that will change things. That will have an influence of things that you don't even think about, because you don't know what organizers look for, etc. So that is one of the things I'm super passionate about, because I always keep hearing that, oh, well, I don't have anything to talk about. It doesn't matter if it's blogging or if it's speaking. I personally prefer the speaking part, but you can do both. Or if you really feel like you don't want to share what you do, or you may also be in a role where you just can't share it, because my point is always, all of us are professionals in the data community, potentially at different levels, because there might be people that have been doing that for 20, 30 years. And there might be someone who just got started. But even that person that just got started, they may do a talk on how I got started or why I decided to become a data platform professional. So no matter which stage you are on, you will find obstacles, challenges, but also rewards that it's worth to share with others that might be going through the exact same experiences. And I think either of those, plus potentially volunteering, because we have all of these great community events, and every single time I keep hearing from, like, I'm going to say other bubbles or other communities. Our community is very specific when it comes to how many of our events are run, because many of them are volunteer based. So it is very common that if you speak at one of the data platform events out there, doesn't matter if it's a Data Saturday or even something like SQL Bits, that you will not get paid to do that. You do that as a volunteer. So even the speakers are volunteers on your own time, but also the entire organization is done by volunteers. People showing you where your room is, all of that is happening based on that level. So even that is a very good way of just becoming from, hey, I'm just an attendee, again, quote unquote, from, hey, I'm getting more and more involved. And that helps you building a network. The other two things on that we can see on that slide, organizing and mentoring, that requires a bit more experience, obviously, because if you want to mentor someone on how to give a talk at a conference, you should have done it before, obviously. If you want to organize your own data platform event, it would probably make sense for you to have attended a couple of these events to see how that goes. And then probably not start by running your entire own event, but get involved as a helper or as a co-organizer for one of the other events, and then maybe build from there. But there's endless opportunities on how people can get involved. And that just, it's not just a way of giving back, it's obviously also that, but it comes with tons of benefits, just being an active part of that community. Because that community is giving you way more back than you're actually putting in it, even if you're volunteering for it.
Well, and there's a big difference, I think, between like the European and the US conferences. There's still mostly community driven here in the US, but we do have a few for-profit private companies that do conferences within the community. And as far as I'm aware, I don't know of any European only companies that are for profit that run conferences. Like all the big ones that I can think of or community driven, like the ones that you and Will have done, from Data Grillin to involving in SQL, but all of those are basically non-profit orgs and or just community based.
Yeah. But then again,
and I did go ahead.
Where do you draw I mean, one of the greatest examples for that is that probably never-ending discussions on the New Path Summit, which used to be a community-driven event and is now a vendor-driven event. And I have to say, for me personally, it now feels more community than it did in the past, because even though before there was a board that was elected by the community and all that, there was still a marketing organization in the back running it. And I have a feeling they were still making a little bit of money off that. So was it really not for profit? Debatable. So that's kind of the other question. Where does community end, or where does an event become a community event and where not? True. Probably not by just putting it in the name of the conference, but by how people get involved in it. So does the community get a chance to speak there, or is it really only vendor driven or only vendor selected? Will there be community people that volunteer in whichever other way? Are they involved in actually not being able to apply to be part of that conference, but also in drafting and shaping that conference? All of that is way more on how I think what makes it a community or not community conference.
Fair, not simply just the label of the organization running it, but a lot of who is actually involved with it. And just since we're on at least this, and I did switch over to the slide of the kind of the ways or things you can volunteer or get involved with. Is there any resources that I can drop into the chat, either from the description that we already have in the YouTube, or ones that I can type in there just to maybe give people some resources to explore if they're looking into doing any of these things, especially around maybe organizing, mentoring, or volunteering, or speaking?
So for the speaking, I got something, of course. If you go to newstarsofdata.com, one thing that we have there is our new speakers improvement library. And that's a bunch of videos that a couple of folks from the community have provided, where they will teach you, they won't teach you, they will rather share their personal opinions, I would say, on how to make a presentation accessible, how to write an abstract, how to come up with a session idea, stuff like that. So we got tons around that. Okay. I do not have a lot on the mentoring, volunteering, and organizing part, just because if somebody is interested in running their own event and just want to get some advice or share, always feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to chat. But I think there's so many different angles depending on where in the world you're running it, on what kind of event you think. Are you more thinking of a user group? Are you thinking of a one-day data Saturday? Are you thinking of a week-long event? Are you thinking 20 people? Are you thinking 2,000 people? If you're thinking 2,000 people, don't ask me because I would have no idea on how to do that. That's my advice there. Also, volunteering will heavily depend on what kind of event you're looking at, because if you're helping out at a data center day, your tasks and duties will be entirely different, obviously, from if you're what do they call it? I think they call it a jumper at SQL Bits. So at SQL Bits, there's always 2 to 3 volunteers that basically all they have is a walkie-talkie, and people will call them on it and be like, you have to go here, you have to go there to fix this, that. They need a cable, they need some water, they have no power, whatever. And then those people just keep running through the venue. I think Bob was at Perry did more than 100 miles at the last SQL Bits. I may be off by a bit, but he did a lot of walking, that's what I can tell you. So again, and for the mentoring, given that, so we're doing New Stars of Data for the 8th time now this October, and we did quite a bunch of iterations of the new speakers track. So I've seen lots of very successful and lots of very unsuccessful mentor-mentee pairings. And one thing that I've learned there is it's neither always about the mentee or always about the mentor. They need to match. So
okay.
They don't need to have kind of, so if you're like, hey, can you get me started on a talk and I want to talk about Power BI, it doesn't matter if I know it helps if I know the topic from a technical perspective, because then I could also give more in-depth advice on, go a little bit deeper on that, go a bit not so deep this. But it's more important that we click on a personal level, that you kind of, the level of respect, but also what the mentee makes out of that, but also how the mentor is available and all that. So that has kind of become the hardest thing in the pre-selection, because we know most of our mentors these days that we have, because we have lots of repeating mentors, but obviously we do not know the mentees because they're entirely new to our community in many ways. And so that's kind of the hardest part in running New Stars, matching the right people together.
So just a quote for you then that I'd be curious on. So the whole idea of like, there's no such thing as a bad teacher, only a bad student. It sounds like then there's more of the stance on like, there can just be mismatches, period. Like you have to have the right personality fits between these two. Like there can definitely be both bad students and bad teachers for each other.
Correct.
Not in general, but just it's a wrong pairing. So seems like there's a bit of an art and science that goes into actually matching those, from the person who needs to make sure they fit right together.
It's a bit of science and also a bit of luck, to be quite honest.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like an interview process. There's a little bit of luck in getting the right person. There's
that, because sometimes we also just have mentors who are trying to be too nice. But one of the jobs of a mentor would also be, if you're doing something where the mentor is convinced that you're doing fundamentally the wrong thing, they have to tell you. And sometimes, and there's no need to be rude about that. You can still be nice to each other and be basically good humans. But if you're just trying to make your mentee feel comfortable, basically tell them everything they're doing is great, that is very encouraging, but it's not very helpful.
Yeah,
and just vice versa. If you have a mentee that doesn't listen to anything the mentor actually tells them, it also gets kind of pointless. And during that presentation, you can tell exactly how well and how intensively they've actually worked together. Because there's obvious things on, like, if the first thing you see is they pull up a slide deck and that slide deck has an 8-point font size on it, I'm going to be like, okay, either
and it's in Comic Sans.
Exactly, yeah, because that makes everything more funny, right?
Yeah.
So
of course.
Tiny obvious stuff like that, but within like the 2 or 3 minutes, you can immediately tell if they did well together or not. It then goes to more stuff like how are they doing on timing. So if I say, hey, you have 60 minutes to talk and you're done after 15 minutes, I'm going to say, well, even if you were talking a bit faster than during the last rehearsal, there's no way the rehearsal was around where it should have been, etc., etc.
Okay. A question to you, curiously, then also both about being a mentor or a mentee, because I certainly had this as a question back in the day when I was even looking into this. Do you need to have been a mentee to someone? So should you have had a mentor before you actually can mentor someone? Like if someone is wanting to look at becoming a mentor, like what type of experience do you think they do or don't need if they're wanting to pursue that, if any?
I'm going to say not necessarily, but it certainly doesn't hurt.
Mm.
So I never had like an active mentor guiding me through my first presentation, for example. But what I did is I just grabbed a couple of my colleagues and was like, can you please listen to me giving that same talk 4 or 5 times and provide me your feedback? And then every single time I would tune and fix it a little bit. Because my first talk was actually a lightning talk where timing is so crucial because you have 10 minutes to get that message across, no more, no less.
Mm-hmm.
So while there was no active mentor-mentee thing, I'm going to say at least you should be, if you want to mentor someone, you should also know how to get and how to accept feedback and listen for potential signs. Because that's the other thing, that mentee in the beginning might be kind of scared, being like, well, scared, maybe a bit of a harsh word, but the mentee might be too impressed by who their mentor is, so that, oh, I can't ask that celebrity person from the data community on how to do this and this. I don't want to waste the time work. That's exactly why they're doing it. So that's also kind of signs I think mentors should probably look out for. But you don't necessarily have to have gone through the exact same process to be a good mentor.
Okay, well, that's good to know because I think sometimes there's uncertainty around what barriers there might be to entry for a certain one of these. Also, even just with in regards to the new stars of data. Just back on that for a second. I think definitely there's people out there who potentially want to speak or to get involved, and I think I certainly had the understanding that there was a lot more experience required to speak for the first time than there really was. That first step can seem like a mile long, and the second step could be an inch, but it sometimes can seem like there's a very big leap to being able to just get up on stage, which is why I think things like SQL Past did some of the options where a few people could present at a certain time, and I've seen some meetup groups as well host things where like once a year in a 1 hour block, they could have 3 people each speak in 20 minutes because it's a lot less scary to present on a topic, maybe a teeny tiny topic for just 20 minutes than to be on stage for full 60. And also to try to make sure you actually have the right material to fill 60 minutes and all that other stuff. So I guess in your experience, for people who are maybe unsure if they're ready to want to do speaking or anything else, or even just dip their toes in the pool, so to speak, what would you recommend for them to get started? Maybe on some public speaking opportunities.
So I would always recommend thinking about what they're passionate about, what they're in a positive way burning for. What is it? Mm-hmm. And it can be something they do in their day job, but it can also be something entirely different where they're like, oh, I always wanted to do that, but I can't. Like, I really want to get more stuff done with Fabric, but we can't because we're an entirely on-prem shop or whatever. Something that they're like, well, this is a great topic for me. You don't have to have the perfect abstract. You don't have to have it all laid out. That's something your mentor and everything can help with. And then the other thing that you need to decide on is, do you think you would feel more comfortable doing that in front of actual people or in a virtual setting? And that's 2 of the questions I think only people can decide on themselves. And then always, again, feel free to reach out to me, but there's tons of people out there. Feel free to reach out to anybody who is a speaker in the data platform community, and I'm pretty sure they will guide you to the right direction. Because new starts is only twice a year, and every single year we get more applications than we can fill spots. But for example, the amazing Christina Mishra, who is running the Kansas City Virtual User Group, which is funny because she doesn't even live close to Kansas City. She just took that user group over and they kind of kept the name, even though it's fully virtual. She's always looking for new talent. So that's the other thing. You could either use that as a way to practice for New Stars or any other event. I mean, New Stars and DataCon is not the only events that do that. Data Scotland, Data Minds Connect, they all have newcomer tracks for you to get started. And the other thing is, all of them, they're also looking out for not just the first time speakers, but also the second time speakers. What DataMinds connected this year, and I really love that idea, is one of the questions they asked on session nights when people submitted their session: how many events have you spoken at? To kind of be like, okay, we also want to get those that do not qualify as newcomers anymore, but are also not deep enough or well known enough or whatever, that people like, oh, I know exactly who that is. So like, oh, this is only your second gig. That changes a couple of things on how you evaluate abstracts, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a ton of opportunities out there. And again, reach out to any of the speakers. Attend the local user groups. A local user group is always a great way to start presenting and speaking, obviously. Or reach out to me, and I'll be more than happy to get you in touch with people that I know that are always looking for new talent. And then from that first steps, like you said, the next step might be a much, much smaller step. One of the other things we're doing this year for the second time at PASS is the new speaker track there, which is not for first-time presenters, but for anybody who has never been at a large event before, because different events come with different barriers, I'm going to say. And all of these big events always have had that. And it has been true for a while, to be quite honest. In the past, it was super, super hard to be a speaker at PASS if you haven't presented there before. So it was always kind of the cool kids club. One of the things that has changed tremendously, and I love how it changed. But in that new speakers track, we do a couple of things different. So it's 3 extra sessions for people that have presented before, but not at a big conference. We're doing it as a separate call for speakers, so people kind of get the chance to double dip, to submit for the regular call for speakers, but also get a chance through that if they have not been accepted. We will again help them, mentor them, adjust the session selection for that this week. I will have to sleep over it again 2 or 3 more times until early next week, and then we can reach out to these people. Now, we did it first time last year, and I think all 3 of them were amazing, and I'm pretty sure this year will be no less.
And the contact info for, like, if somebody needed to reach out to you for some additional resources, I'm guessing LinkedIn would be the best way to
LinkedIn is perfect. I mean, I'm also on Twitter, or X as they call it these days, but LinkedIn is super easy for me to manage, so that's always a good start.
Okay.
Just drop a little note when you're reaching out and connecting me on why you're doing that, because I mean, all of us these days, we get all of these LinkedIn requests for people. I have no idea who you are, and you're also not telling me why you want to be connected with me. And then, depending on their company and job description, I'll be like, well, they're from that area, was presenting last night, so it's probably someone who was at that user group, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, leave me like a one-liner that really helps me getting some context.
Absolutely. And I think at least in the US, the best place that I found to find local user groups is usually even Meetup. I'm guessing that's the same for you, or is there any other websites that are good for finding? Okay.
No, that is perfect. So for user groups, I would always start not just coming. Meetup, because Meetup is very broad. In the end, they are pretty much all on Meetup. But if you go to the Azure Data Community, just search Google or Bing for Azure Data Community. You will be led to the page for that on the Microsoft website. They have a deep link to a list of all the Microsoft Data Platform specific user groups, which I think helps narrowing it down a bit, because if you go to Meetup and just look for data, you will get, even if you're just looking for something local, that might be a bit overwhelming potentially.
There we go. Just we have a Power BI.
And then there is one other very great website, honestly, called for dataspeakers.com by Daniel Hutmacher. Which is an amazing resource for speakers, because basically organizers can register their event there, and then speakers will get an email letting them know like, hey, there's a new event that you can submit to. But I think it's also an amazing resource for attendees, because now that basically everybody is using that, if you want to get an idea of all the events that are happening, either virtual or in person, you go to that website, you get a list of all the events. Even if you don't care about speaking there maybe yet, it might be something in your area that you had no idea is happening and that you may just attend. Because also keep in mind, many of our events are free to attend. So if you go to a data set today, this will be free. Some of them charge like $5-10 for lunch, but in my book, that still counts as free.
I mean, I just presented at a Data Saturday in Croatia as a work trip, but
Yeah.
largely an excuse to get a chance to go to Zagreb and Dubrovnik. But yeah, like I did not realize that Call for Data Speakers was community driven until like last year, and like, oh, that's entirely just it's partially why I forget his name, the person who created it, but
Daniel Hutmacher.
thank you, yeah, and like it helps him get his MVP every year because it's such a great community contribution, and I get an email 2-3 times a week of a new conference that was posted onto there, and would you like to apply? So it's the easiest way for me to stay on top of making sure I don't miss out on an opportunity as a speaker to like, oh man, I really would have loved to go or present. The window's already closed now. So subscribing to that, even if you, as you said, even if you're technically not a speaker, just subscribing to the feed or signing up as a speaker for those, you'll at least get an email notification just to say a new conference is popped up. So it is just a great way to be notified of what's happening in the community.
And there's a lot happening, I can tell you that. So
too many to present at, I can say for sure. So we've
it has gotten way less over COVID, but still,
yeah.
So if you compare how many SQL Saturdays we had pre-COVID and how many SQL and Data Saturdays combined we have now, because it's getting harder and harder to secure venues and all that. It's easier to present at all of them, but it's still too much.
That's yeah, and COVID burned us, a few of us out a little bit, I think, on like too much online content. We were obviously trying to connect when we were all living in a bubble, but yeah, I think it's gotten back to a normal amount again, with a mixture of in-person and online. I just like that there's a lot more options for hybrid than there used to be. I think that was one of the big takeaways. So it's very easy to present from your chair, and still involve yourself with the community without having to physically travel, which was definitely harder to do before COVID. You would have had to like actually go places, or fly or drive.
What we kind of see is that it's hard for many attendees to get back to in person because also lots of employers are obviously like, well, you know what, we don't have budget for that anymore because we've seen for 3 years that you don't need it. But speakers are keen on, which kind of led to another event we're actually going to have the next iteration next week, Data Left Unattended, where all the speakers are coming together in a room, and we're still going to have speaker dinner and shirts and all of that, but all the attendees are going to be virtual. So,
so it's a conference where the speakers will all be together in person, but only with virtual attendees.
Correct.
I like the idea of it. It sounds like it's a great way to present, but also just you get to hang out with a bunch of friends and colleagues for.
I was going to say, another very appropriate title for that conference is Drinking and Hanging Out with Friends. But then again, from a speaker perspective, isn't that a lot what still drives you and makes you go to conferences, meeting all the new friends, talking to them about non-technical things, but also, hey, do you have like 5-10 minutes that we can talk about this and this issue that I ran into, et cetera, et cetera. So, yes. And I don't think it would be a concept that would work like exclusively or so. But to be also quite honest, I don't really believe in hybrid. I yet have to see an event doing a really good hybrid event, because you can do super good online events and super good in person. But creating something where the experience for online and in person attendees is really even close to comparable, I have yet to see that, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I've done that with SQL Bits, where there are thankfully like extra staff that does, they can start reading the questions to you, and they try to help you make sure you don't forget to talk to them. But it's still it's really easy to get lost in the crowd in front of you and like, oh, I'm sorry, I gotta like turn to camera one and hey, anybody in the streaming online, what would you like to ask a question on? And I've done it a couple of times where I've forgotten, and then I got feedback like, you kind of forgot about us. I'm like, I'm sorry, I lost myself in what I was talking about in the crowd. Yeah.
Like even if you're super well at making sure you include them in your session, at the end of the session, they're out. There is no hallway track. If it's pure online, people can meet in the virtual hallway. That whole idea that people that are in person at the conference, and there's good and bad virtual hallways. I've seen very great implementations of it, where people had fun hanging out for hours in that virtual room. And I've seen very, very bad where it was like, well, here's a Teams channel, you can all chat. And it's like, oh, thank you. That is a super creative solution, not, but anyways. But that idea where people that are actually in person will mingle with the online attendees in a chat room, that's not happening. Because the reason that I am in person is that I want to talk to in-person people on the actual hallway and not be stuck in a chat room. So, and that's what I mean, that entire hybrid thing. There's good ways, and Bits does a great job on that, on getting the content across.
Yep.
Not so much the entire conference experience.
Well, yeah, and I think that's, I mean, as someone who is expert-ish enough in most of the topics that I need to be outside of new technology coming out, which we always try to stay up to date on. Like, I don't, for the most part now, go to conferences that much anymore to, so I want some takeaways and a little bit of learning, but a lot of it is, as you said, is it's the connections, the attendees, the conversations, it's the conference experience, it's everything in between the actual topic content, and it is easiest in person. You can do it online, but as you said, like it's hard to do both audiences when you do the hybrid scenario. And that you can do the content, but it's the hallways and all that other stuff where you almost have to do it twice. You'd have to have a hallway session where you do that, and then you pop off somewhere for 5 minutes to hop on a Teams call and give a chance for people to talk to you a little bit.
Exactly.
So yeah, I agree, and I didn't Pass switch off of. Because their first year back, they did hybrid, right?
And their first year, they did hybrid, and they ran into the same issue that I think I was just describing, where they got the content out, and that's the thing, they still get the content out in a very reasonable time. So a couple of days after the session, people that bought the online package only can watch the recording.
Yep.
It's just not getting streamed. Where I'm like, well, if it's only about the content, there's no content that is so fresh that you need to consume it today, that it makes that big of a difference if it's today or 3 days from now. If it's today or 6 months from now, that's a difference. But a couple of days don't make a difference.
True.
So
yep. And they didn't do live hybrid this year, right? Like they were like
they did
2023.
Not. And
yeah.
So
they always do the recordings, but
yep.
Well, exactly. It adds them ton of technical overhead to it, and it's, as you were saying, if the only thing you're really there for is the content, you can watch the recording when it gets posted in a couple of days, and it's still topical and fine. You just might not be able to tweet about it as quickly as somebody else did, but you're saving 2/3 of the price. Exactly. We've dabbled a lot on like blogging, public speaking, organizing, mentoring, volunteering, everything that we see here. Yeah, so we actually have a question that I could pop up. So from Fernando, he joined late, but he wanted to know regarding public speaking, if they're not an expert, is it still good to go, or I guess present on a basic topic?
Hell yeah. First of all, we all started somewhere, but also keep in mind, tons of people out there have to start. So I rarely go to sessions at all at conferences these days, not because I think I know everything, quite the contrary, but there is so much going on that at some point I just don't have the bandwidth anymore. I haven't been to like a 400 or 500 level session in years, just because that is something I need to consume in a quiet room where ideally can pause and think about something, do some extra research, etc., etc. If I walk into a 500 level session, my mind will be blown afterwards potentially, but I will not walk up like, oh, this solved everything for me. And also keep in mind, there's a reason why SQL Saturdays became Data Saturdays and all that. Our field has always been broad, but that has changed so much, so much over the past couple of years. So you may be a DBA and everybody's talking about Fabric. There is no point for you to go into like here's a deep dive on performance tuning a data lake. You need that basic intro session on, hey, what is Fabric? Or you may need that basic intro session, hey, what's DBT? Hey, what is Databricks? You may even need that basic intro session on some older stuff. Hey, what is integration services, for you to better understand that team that you're about to work with that is about to migrate, because you might be the expert on writing Spark notebooks, but you're not the expert, or you don't even have an idea of how the old concepts that they're moving away from are working, et cetera, et cetera. So, or you just, I keep saying just, and just is not the word that I actually mean, but you're a DBA in your role, and you just want to get an idea. Yes, just again. You just want to get an idea of what Power BI does, what you can do with it, without becoming a visualization expert. So, tons of basic stuff out there that many people need to learn. If that's something they want to go deeper from there, because this is just where they're starting, or if it's just like, well, I keep hearing all these buzzwords, I want to get a little deeper than just knowing the word, but also knowing what it means. Totally, go for it.
Excellent. And like to mirror off of what you said, I think pretty much every presenter that I've ever met, including myself, there's always a little bit of the imposter syndrome that we have, and it never goes away. And it's motivating because I think if you ever completely lose the imposter syndrome and you think you are like just a perfect expert on something, and you stop practicing, the knife gets dull. So a little bit of like make sure you stay sharp helps to I think keep the content good and fresh. But I mean I still, even today, there's multiple, probably over half the topics that I'd present on I wouldn't necessarily call myself personally an expert on. Like I'm very proficient in it, but there are plenty of people better at me at the majority of stuff that I present on. But I present it in a way that I think is useful. It provides enough information that people can get something off of it. But yeah, you don't have to, as long as you're familiar enough that you can explain something in a way that's understandable and meaningful in some capacity to the person you're delivering it to, especially with an intro. If you're delivering, you don't have to be an expert to present an intro topic. And the only other thing that I'd say on that, to dig a little bit maybe behind the question, is it is very okay as a presenter to say I don't know. And I think that can be sometimes scary for a lot of people presenting, is the like, oh, but what about if I get asked a question? I have to know everything. Like, no, you can. Honestly, what I usually do is like, I don't know, but I'd love to look into it. Send me a message on LinkedIn and I'll, find it out for you later or something like that.
Which is also a great conversation to have later.
Exactly. So it's you don't have to know everything about everything. Being a teacher means that you know enough, but not all of it. Yep, absolutely.
Also keep in mind, it doesn't have to be a technical thing. To this day, one of my most favorite sessions I've seen was by Rosie Jurovich at New Stars of Data, where she was giving a session where she basically explained how she became a self-taught data platform professional. She's a very technical person, so she can tell us all kinds of things about technical things that many of us would be like, oh, wow, I had no idea that's how it works. But there's also the non-technical side of the house that people need to understand how important they are. And non-technical can mean a lot of things. It can be personal development, it can be professional development, or it can really be non-tech, like a talk on diversity, for example. So all of that should have, and at most conference does have, room in our community. So I'm going to say pretty much everybody who is part of the data community is kind of a technical expert in their own way.
Yeah.
But as you've said, there may be imposter syndrome, and then that might be another good way of getting started and just getting a feeling of, do you really want to go that path of speaking?
Exactly. And as you said, not all topics have to be technical. There are the two conferences that I think do the best at presenting soft skills. SQL Bits is, at least from the time that I've been in the circuit, has been doing it longer than others. Passes has done it as well. But it's it's nice to be able to see both from a conference perspective, the mental topics on mental health, or just like what does it mean to become a presenter? Like, what was my path to becoming a confident speaker, or how do I deal with ADHD in tech, which is something that I did present on last year. So your expertise, or at least your takeaways that you've had, your experience on something, it's almost like a case study to a degree, but it's not a technical case study. It's a case study on your path to growing on a particular interaction experience. What's it like to have to deal with 10 managers? I'm sure that would probably be a great topic for a lot of people in companies. Just like, what has been your experience? And if anything, sometimes it's just nice for people to sit in a session and know that somebody else has gone through a similar experience. And if that's one of the few takeaways, it just gives comfort on knowing that like I'm not alone on dealing with something just as part of my day-to-day work life. I think a lot of people like to be able to resonate with that and just come away knowing that there are other people out there to reach out to if they have questions on something that's just a pain point for them within their work.
Agree. Or it can be a mix of technical and non-technical, like Red of West. They have a great session on storing gender information in databases. We're like, well, if you're using a bit field for that, basically all you can do is male and female, if at best, and it's not even very descriptive. First, there's more to gender than just male and female, and so you're kind of getting that. How can you solve that from a technical perspective, paired with the non-technical discussion? So that was also a great presentation.
Changing the data type from binary to like open text or something like that. Yeah. I like that. That's, it also just, it adds a bit of flavor to, because data can be very dry sometimes, but adding an artistic or perspective spin on it can certainly add a bit of seasoning to the pot, so to speak.
Agreed.
We've talked, we have about 10-ish minutes, and we've talked about blogging, public speaking, organizing, mentoring, volunteering that we have here. Is there anything left that we'd like to maybe, or that you'd like to dive into a little bit further, or anything else you want to cover as we're starting to get towards the end here?
So, I mean, there's tons of more things that you can do, but they're probably all more or less fit in that category. I think one of the things, and we're going to get over that one pretty quickly, is do something great. But the question is also, I think, why should we do that? And that is something I cannot stress enough, because we have that learning perspective at conferences or in that community, and that is by far that's a great aspect. That's a very important aspect, because also when you're trying to convince your boss, assuming you have a boss, to send you to a conference, you will probably not convince them by being like, hey, I want to hang out with some really fun people, but you convince them by, hey, I'm going to attend that pre-con, and after that I will know how to drive that. Well, let's stick with the Fabric example, the Fabric implementation at our company, for example. But there is so much more. Don't tell that to your boss when you're trying to convince them. But if I see how many people I've met over the past 8, 9, 10 years in that community that have switched to, I'm going to say, better jobs that they've found for this community. So being an active part of that community, because I said earlier, it gives you so much more back than just than you're giving in. You may find a new job, potentially a better job, if you're looking for it or not. Sometimes opportunities just pop up. You find amazing friends that you really just can have fun with, like Wolfgang Strasser and I, for example, the day before MVP, somebody was like, you know what, we're going to spend the night in San Francisco and just do some touristy sightseeing, have a nice dinner and all that. Mm-hmm. You broaden your circles, but you also will find an amazing support network, because from time to time life is happening in not the greatest of ways, and I've personally experienced it from stuff that happened to me, but also from what I've seen to others in this, how great this support network is from people that are just reaching out, hey, if you need to talk, I'm here for you, but also for those that need it, hey, how can we help you? I was not personally in that situation, but I've seen so many others that just ended up in a rough spot. Hey, how can we help you out financially? How can we help you take care of what is it you need? And people are just there without you even asking.
The support network there that comes from it a lot. I mean, it's a cliche thing to say, but like the connections that you can make are certainly something that I think really does drive a lot of us to continue to attend these conferences. Like, I mean, I take 4 to 5 weeks a year of trips that are conference related, and like that's not cheap when you run your own business, for sure. But the amount of connections that I make with people and colleagues and friends that I including yourself, that I made around the world as I continue to do this, I think is it adds a lot of intrinsic value, I think, outside of, like, if you did just the content and everything else. Yeah.
And
pictures, very motivational.
You don't have to do, that's the thing, you don't have to do much because there's a ton of people interacting and acting in this community on very different levels. There's people who are like, oh, well, you're doing way too much. And then there's people like, well, you only hear of them like every other year. But still, by just being present, all things will fall together, and that puzzle will kind of solve itself without. It's not like you actually have to work at. It is a very welcoming community where basically all you have to do is show up.
That's true. I mean, that's the minimum you need. It's a very low bar to like show up, hang out, and anything else on that is added bonus.
I mean, we call it SQL family. That also implies that we have those one or two weird uncles that nobody really wants to invite for Thanksgiving. But on the grand scheme of things, of this community is amazing, and I'm very happy and proud to be a part of it.
I like Olivia has mentioned also make sure to be nice, though I would say that is a given. Always
it is a given for most people, but then again, wherever many people get together, there's people involved, and there's no people are the worst. So there's also
true. No, I completely agree. And yeah, I think as we're wrapping up, any takeaways for people to have something that they can pursue to get started, or any final words of wisdom that you would like to impart that maybe hasn't been covered already?
Everyone has a story, and think about what you can do. Think about what you can do. I mean, the first step is get involved, and it doesn't have to be a mentor, but find kind of that one person that you can talk to there. Hey, have you ever been to this and this event? Do you think it's worth going there to? Do something that you're passionate about. Find the right channel, because you may be someone that's like, well, I want to do quick YouTube tips where I share every week in a 5-minute clip on how I solved a specific problem. Or you may want to blog about it. You will want to find the right channel that really works for you. And I think the most important thing is we're all different in so many different ways. So it's not one size fits all. So since you were asking for kind of a closing message, do something that makes you happy. Don't start speaking because Ben keeps telling people that they should start with public speaking. They really should, but don't do it because of that. But make sure that what you're doing makes you happy. Do something that makes you passionate, that you're passionate about. Do something where, like, well, being part of this community, being a public speaker, being a blogger, that kind of made my life better. Don't even have to go as far as made me a better person, but this is something that made me happier. This is something that I gained from, and you will not gain from something where, like, well, I'm only doing it because my boss told me that one of the quotas I have to meet is write at least one blog post a month or so. That's not what this is about. This is about do something where, like, cool, this really helped me. This is what gets me going, even though it may mean a bit of extra work.
I like that. The do whatever makes you happy. I think like to start with this is it's you can be encouraged to do something, but does it fit with what you want to do? And which is why you have the opportunities between there's speaking, volunteering, mentor, mentee. There's a lot of ways to involve yourself with the community that fits with the type of engagement that may or may not fit with whatever you'd want to do. And like I'd even say as a conversation around like speaking, like before I started teaching and everything else and getting involved in university now, public speaking, I never in a million years thought I would enjoy it. Like I think public speaking for most people terrifies them if they've not done it before. But that's one of the few ones that I would actually say, if it is something that at least the idea of it, ignoring the people aspect of you presenting to people in a room, but the idea of sharing your knowledge sounds intriguing enough, consider at least trying it out once virtually or in person, even if it does seem scary, because the amount of like the level of scariness that it actually is once you've tried it is for most people that I've talked to, including myself, always a lot lower than you think it will be. That's one of my few encouragements that I'll try to say is that it will be scary for almost everybody who tries it for the first time. I've never met someone who's like, oh yeah, I walked onto the stage for the first time in my life and just immediately it was natural, it felt great. Like, no, having a bunch of eyes on you from a biological perspective is a very uncomfortable feeling when they're all staring at you, waiting for you to say your next word. But you get used to it, and for some, it becomes very enjoyable. And it's still not for everyone, but there is a little bit of a threshold of just getting used to being in a room of people with attention on you.
I agree. I was going to say just that. You may try it, and you may walk off stage and be like, okay, it was as horrible as I thought. That doesn't mean you failed. That only means you were brave enough to give it a try.
Yeah.
It wasn't for you, and then you try something else. So
Exactly.
when we do new styles of data with 14, 16, 21, depending on how big we're running it, we're kind of varying it always a bit. Not all of them you will meet a month later at another conference, because some of them will just be like, okay, that was too much work, I didn't enjoy it. And that's cool. Because many of them just figure out, hey, I'm going to do something else that is more for me. Give it a try. That's kind of all I'm recommending. I'm not asking it, I'm recommending it to you, because it might as well influence your life in a very positive way.
Agreed. It's I think with a lot of things in life, I usually say with most of, try it twice, because the first time could be a fluke, and maybe just you have a bad apple or something. Second time, that I feel it's started to get enough evidence, like, maybe this is just not for me. But when and able, give something a try just to see if it's for you, and it won't always be, but at least you made the effort, and you can now like say for yourself, like, yep, I can definitively know, like, that was just not the thing that vibes with me. Perfect. With that then, I think we're good at point to wrap up. And Ben, I want to thank you for coming on. This has been a great conversation, and I think it's good to have these conversational type discussions, especially for people wanting to get involved with the community. So I appreciate you coming on to take your time with this, and hopefully also at a minimum I'll see you at PASS, if not maybe sometime earlier this year, and somewhere over in Europe as well.
Thank you very much for having me. This was fun. Again, anybody who wants to chat about public speaking, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn and start a conversation. I would love that. And again, thank you for having me. Looking forward to meet you probably in Europe and PASS. And then exactly. Up to more shenanigans, I guess.
Oh, 100%. And until next time then. All right.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you so much for watching. Please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. And if you want to help support this channel, take a look at our channel memberships or our merchandise store for cool swag. And last but not least, please consider sharing this video on your social media platform of choice to help our channel grow. So, until next time.